Hello, everybody. This is Paweł Mościcki, podcast Inny Świat, Another World. I'm speaking in English because this is another of our episodes in English. Before we start our today's program, I would like to remind you that you can and should like us, comment, subscribe to our channel. If you want to support it financially, feel free to do it on our website, patronite.pl/inny świat. For those of you who can speak Polish more than the English speakers. And today I have a great pleasure to welcome our guest, Marta Havryshko. Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Marta is, we are starting with presenting your very rich and complicated career. But let me just start with saying that you are, I mean, you know that, but I do it for our audience. You are an academic scholar in the discipline of Holocaust studies, memory studies. You come from Ukraine, and particularly from Lviv, and now you reside and work in Clark University in United States. When I regard your CV, so to speak, and your various jobs and your itinerary, it's very rich and very complex, because you were working in Hamburg, in Vienna, in Jerusalem, in Basel, in Poland twice, Warsaw and Rzeszów, which kind of connects us even more than just the neighborhood between Poland and Ukraine. But now you reside in the United States, and I would like to ask you two things. First, why is it so? And the second, I would particularly like to ask you about Babi Yar Holocaust Memory Center, which was supposed to be, I guess, your place of professional development as well. And how come you are not there and you are in Clark University? Please, if you want to answer this, and feel free to draw on whatever you like, and then we'll jump to the very core of our today's subjects.
Thank you so much, Paweł. Dzień dobry. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Paweł, for this kind introduction. I really have very complicated, let's say, career mostly due to the political situation in Ukraine and war situation in Ukraine. When the Russian full-scale invasion started, I just recently came from Munich, where I hold a temporal research position at Leibniz Institute, Center for Holocaust Studies, and I developed my project on Holocaust in Ukraine, precisely sexual violence during the Holocaust in Ukraine, because I'm developing my book. And I was just appointed a director of one of the institute at the Babi Yar Holocaust Memorial Center. And I had so many plans. I planned so many programs, educational programs, lecture series, book presentations. I had so many plans. I planned to move with my family to Kyiv, where Babi Yar Holocaust Memorial Center is located. But everything was canceled over one night, basically, and it was denied when Russia attacked Ukraine on 21st February 2022. And I remember this night very well. I couldn't sleep because my friends from different countries, mostly from US, were chatting me and asked me, are you prepared to flee the country? Because we believe that Russia will do something. And I must admit that as a Ukraine who live in a war-torn country for years and who witness how Russian forces, armed forces, are moving back and forth, who are making drills, across Ukraine border, I belong to those of Ukrainians who didn't believe in full-scale invasion. So when Putin started his angry speech, I was, from the very beginning of the speech, it was obvious that this is about war, full-scale invasion, and it was very dramatic, and in my head, the first images and first thoughts in my head were from the life stories of my heroines of my book. I started to think about Ukrainian Jewish women in Lviv who made decision in the first day of German attack at Soviet Union on 22 June 1941, how they made their decision: flee, leave your country, or be with your relatives. You know what to do with your, how to protect your family members, how to protect your children, how to protect your husbands, because the first thought of Jewish women back then was that men will be primary targets for German forces, and they were actually primary targets. We know that in this wave of anti-Jewish violence, anti-Jewish pogroms, that was actually also in Poland, and we all know Jan Gross' book. Yes, he described this intimate violence. In Ukraine was the same wave of pogroms. In many places like Lviv or Lviv, those pogroms were instigated and orchestrated by Germans. But also we have other places where, you know, German army, Russians retreated, Soviets retreated, but Germans didn't come yet, and they organized pogroms, and many members of Ukrainian nationalists on the ground were involved in this pogrom. So I started to think about those women, about those decisions. And as a Holocaust scholar, as a person who studied war, and as a person who studied intimate violence, I decided to flee my country. I took my 9-year-old son, and with the help of Polish Holocaust scholars, actually, we crossed the border. We spent 1 week, wonderful week, with my Polish friends who are sociologists as well, who are historians. We are trying to recover from this trauma, actually, trauma of fleeing, a trauma of making sense of what happened to us. At first, we ended up in Poland, then we spent one month in Germany, and then we fled to Switzerland, where I occupied a research position at Basel University, and I actually taught a course about gender dimension of Russian war against Ukraine. But later, I was invited by Clark University to be a visiting assistant professor for Holocaust pedagogies and anti-Semitism studies. And actually, today, I am a professor, visiting professor there, and I teach wonderful courses on anti-Semitism, on racism in modern times, on Holocaust, on genocides in Eastern Europe, for example. So we teach different aspects, and another main course is related to sexual violence in different wars, in different genocide. And we speak a lot about Poland, actually. We speak about, you know, about Warsaw Uprising, about Soviet Poland, about repressions, about everything. We speak a lot. Poland is and about contemporary issues in Poland and memory politics connected to Holocaust distortion, let's say, and some, you know, problems in this, you know, and about different memory actors who are trying to undermine this hegemonic nationalistic memory discourse in Poland. So we had a lot of work, and we have a lot of examples from Poland that we discuss with my students, and it's very interesting because some of my students know Polish language. They are American citizens, but they have some Polish background, and it's wonderful that we have this possibility to discuss different aspects of, you know, human behavior in times of crisis. So on the one hand, you know, I'm really traumatized by this war, and traumatized in so many ways, you know, as a human being, as a mother, as a historian, as a Ukrainian, you know, as a Holocaust scholar, as a feminist. But at the same time, I believe that it's a good opportunity to, you know, to speak about Ukraine outside Ukraine as well, and to speak more about the Holocaust, and not only Holocaust, but Holodomor and Soviet repressions. So basically state violence in the territory of Eastern Europe, outside Eastern Europe, when knowledge is so limited, because many my American students have very poor knowledge of Eastern Europe. But they are full of ethnic stereotypes about Eastern Europe, you know, about, you know, Polish wars, very popular, Bobber something, you know. So those stereotypes they know, but, you know, they are not aware fully of this very complicated history and why so many people hate Russian, for example, and why they associate them precisely with Soviet past, with Soviet repressions, and with all bad things in you know, past Polish history.
Yeah, you know, it's funny because everything you say could be said, I mean, shared and probably discussed, and for sure discussed by the majority of my friends from academia. I mean, not the academia as such, because, as you know, and probably we share this problem together. Academia in Poland also can be very right-wing and very well, ahistoric in the sense of, you know, promoting rather historical myths than academic knowledge. But at the same time, when I follow your social media, and especially Twitter and Facebook, you say things that are totally unacceptable and taboo in exactly the same circles. And I have the same problem, because I share a lot of what you said, and probably we have a similar spontaneous approach to various problems. But at the same time, I feel a lot isolated in when it comes to discussing the actual war in Ukraine. Not because I'm not sympathetic to Ukrainians or whatever you would like to call it, but because I don't share these taboos. And one of those, if not the biggest, is the presence and influence of far right in Ukraine. I'm saying far right, which kind of started to be an empty signifier, because I think nowadays it kind of means everything and nothing at the same time. I mean, you know, the NAZI types of ideologies.
Yes.
And I think that, you know, we have a very particular problem with discussing this subject. It's very hot and dense, because one of the so to speak reasons given by Putin to invade Ukraine was denazification. And since it's part of his official war rhetoric, we kind of feel obliged to counter it. Yes. And to say that since the invasion is illegal, which it is, we have to conclude that everything about far right in Ukraine is just Russian propaganda. And I wanted to ask you how you see it. So maybe let's start with a very particular question: how present and how important for today's political landscape in Ukraine is far right, in the sense of ideology, but also in the sense of particular people, movements, and institutions?
Okay, thank you so much for this question. Yes. The main problem, actually, that many people, they have big empathy towards Ukraine, and they want to protect Ukrainians, from those, you know, accusations, and they really believe that many of those accusations are false, and many of them are actually false, yes, and we should also challenge this, you know, Kremlin propaganda. But at the same time, what we observe in Western media, I'm deeply, let's say, embedded in American society nowadays, and I am tracing these narratives in Western media, and I'm highly disappointed. Because before full-scale invasion, before the start of full-scale invasion, we in Western media, we had many publications about the problems with Azov, for example, specifically with Azov, with glorification of Bandera, Shukhevich, other Nazi collaborators, with glorification of Waffen-SS division Galicia, and with other paramilitary groups like Karpatska Sich, or for example, Franko organization in the Eastern Ukraine, or other organization. After 2022, we have complete silence. And what is very interesting, in my course on anti-Semitism and racism, I always make reference to ADL, Anti-Defamation League. Yeah, because it's the main body that, you know, develops so many educational tools, basically. Yeah, they have so many articles actually about Azov, about their right-wing, you know, enterprises, you know, about their ideology, explaining Volksangel. You know, they have a lot of articles. And what is interesting, after 2022, it was just complete silence. The narrative changed, you know, completely. Now the same symbols, the same people, the same slogans are not anymore radical, are not anymore ultranationalist. And this is crazy. And what I observed in Western media, we have whitewashing of those people. What I observed last year in for example, in Poland, guys, Germany didn't allow Azov to make their dvizh. It was planned as, you know, like entertainment event, but it was basically for recruitment purpose. And it was for spreading ideology and building up relations with Polish far right. And they organized their presentation in several Polish cities. In Germany, they failed to do that because leftists were more conscious about the threats from Azov, while Polish people and Polish left didn't organize any counteraction. And it's very strange for me. Why? Azov's brigade, the 3rd Assault Brigade, which is based ideologically, and if you visit their site, they clearly stated that they are the same, that they are part of the Azov movement. So in September 2023, Azov's 3rd Brigade organized a photo exhibition in Museum of Kyiv, where they put 3 photos of Waffen-SS Division Galicia in very celebratory manner, without even mentioning that they belong to Waffen-SS. They just put Division Galicia during the Second World War. And during this opening ceremony, number of politicians, journalists, human rights activists, historians were present, and nobody challenged this narrative. But it was poor glorification, and timing matters, because it was in the days of so-called Gunka Gate, when Waffen-SS veteran received standing ovation in Canadian Parliament, and due to, you know, publication of Ivan Kachanovsky, yeah, everyone learned that he fought those bad Russians in the ranks of Nazi collaborationist unit. So why Azov is celebrated in, you know, in Poland, when they celebrate Waffen-SS Division Galicia openly? Their social media openly celebrate Waffen-SS Division Galicia, and we know that members of Waffen-SS Division Galicia participated in, you know, dealing with Warsaw Uprising. They made massacre in Guta Poniatska and other cities. Another example, last week, Polskie Radio published an article with another member of the 3rd Assault Brigade, Korzemiakin, Alexei Korzemiakin. It was, you know, he was portrayed as a hero, as a, you know, person who just sacrificed his life to battle to fight these orcs from these hordes from east, you know, his Russians who are, you know, trapped in Russia and are evil. So, and I put very short post on a Facebook post, just, you know, open to public. I asked Polskie Radio why you didn't fact check his background. He was a skinhead. He has a record of participating in attempted murder of Azerbaijan citizen in Russia, in his native Syktyvkar. He spent in prison 7 years. He's all covered with swastikas, with Hitler here, big Hitler here on his chest. this guy is making anti-Semitic jokes in his Telegram channel. And when our Ukrainian Holocaust survivor, Roman Schwarzman, gave his public talk during Holocaust Memorial Day, Remembrance Day at Bundestag, he made, he started to mock him publicly in his Telegram channel. And he put knife and coffin in his post. So he's not, he's not the person portrayed in this interview. And guess what? Next day, this interview was erased from the website of Polish radio. So I believe it's very good to, so we could challenge them and should challenge them, because you can't give a platform to neo-Nazis to promote their ideology. We can't give them a platform, despite, their glorious fight against Russian invaders. We can't make good Nazis and bad Nazis, because we know that all those good Nazis after the war will go to their respective countries and will be involved in killing and terrorism and other criminal activity. And with their military experience, those who trace far-right channels know they express sadistic joy over killing. They pose with corpses of Russian soldiers, make pictures, and they are radicalized by war, by this traumatic experience, and they became more more violent, more full of hate. And what happened if they will return to Ukraine? And my special message to Poland. Dear Polish friends, do you know that last year during Independence Day in Ukraine, in Lviv, there was a conference of neo-Nazi under their supervision of Ukraine military intelligence, where your far-right group, Trzecia Droga, the Third Way, participated. The whole conference was about neo-Nazism and how we should keep Europe white and how we should protect our white children and get rid of those immigrants. So those people are building network. And if you allow and celebrate them to your country, if you allow them networking, if you do not question their tattoos, if you do not question their slogans, if you avoid inconvenient questions because you regarded them as a freedom fighters, you will have bad consequences of this. It's very dangerous. At first, they are celebrated as freedom fighters. You delegate them right to fight Russians because you afraid to go there. You afraid that your friends could be in these trenches. You afraid that you will witness how FPV drone will torn apart your friend or your son or your husband. That's why you delegate this right to fight with this, Putin's hordes to those people. But those people are dangerous. They are radical and they are very dangerous. Just listen to them. Just pay attention to their social media. In Ukraine, why, the problem after 2022 became even bigger. The problem became bigger. We have memory laws. I believe Poland has very similar. When we acquitted after Maidan, several laws were adopted. That sparks controversy in Poland because they glorified UNUPA. But one of the problems is that one memorial law acquitted National Socialist regime and Soviet regime. And they said both regimes were totalitarian, were criminal regimes, and we should not support them. And we should punish those people who disseminate their symbols, who glorify them, who justify their crimes. But what we have now in Ukraine? Yes, in Ukraine, we have military unit named Nachtigal. In Ukraine history, we have only one Nachtigal. In Ukrainian military tradition, there is only one Nachtigal. And this Nachtigal was Nazi formation under Roman Shukhevich, which entered, it was the first unit which entered Lviv on 30 June 1941. They were Nazi collaborators. They participated in pogroms of Jews in Vinnytsia Oblast. Then Roman Shukhevich was sent as, then they were transformed in Schutzmannschaft battalion and made crimes against civilian population in Belarus. And Ukrainian military forces allowed this to happen. How it comes? You persecute babushkas who put, elderly ladies, who put, Prapor Победы, Flag Победы on 9 May, who celebrate, Victory Day. You put them on trial. They can face 5 years in prison. But at the same time, you name one of your elite units, Nachtigall. Another example, we have military unit Vedmedi, who was a part of Azov before 2022, and in spring it was transferred to another brigade, but their official logo are SS bolts and SS motto, "My honor is loyalty." Check this, it's open information. It's not a Russian propaganda, it's not a Russian talking point. Check this on Wikipedia, actually. So what the hell is that? Why we allow Nazi apology in our country, who was left, with almost 10 million people killed after the Second World War, and among them 1.5 million of Jews? Why we celebrate Nazi regime? How it help you fight Russians? I can't understand this. The problem now is bigger even, because everyone is pretending that those guys are just patriots, are just nationalists. So why they promote Nazi regime? Why they use Nazi symbols? Why they sell T-shirts with Auschwitz University? Why they are doing this in Ukraine so openly? Why they even make money from Nazi apology? Why is this happening? And why nobody is questioning this? I have a question for many media outlets and their responsibility.
Sorry, I was muted. Yeah, I have the same questions basically, because I think I got to realize that whatever your position politically and whatever are your opinions, etc. I mean, Nazis is a red line. I mean, there is no usage of it that I could imagine being acceptable for me, and that's why I am also shocked, because in Poland, immediately almost. The same processes were repeated that were present in Western media and so on. I remember that I think that the world record is, I think, Spiegel or one of German weeklies who published the cover or an article illustrated with a photography, and the article said that there is no more neo-Nazi problem in Ukraine, and the photo showed a guy with Wolfsangel, and so I thought then that we are taught to be blind, because you see the image with a guy having a tattoo which is directly connected with the symbolic, but the caption says you don't see it. It doesn't exist. That's the level of, I would say, disavowal or denial of reality that we are in, and a lot of people who are specialized in far-right movements and so on and so forth. The minute the war started, they started also to argue, that these people in Ukraine got de-radicalized. They no longer treat the symbolic seriously. It's just a subculture. They understand it differently than we do, because they got independence thanks to UPA and ON, etc., etc. So I think that there is the whole body of arguments that were prepared for this purpose of legitimizing everything that is useful for escalating this war, from my opinion. And before we go there, because I would like to ask you about your opinions regarding the war as such, I would just for a minute like to concentrate on other institutions, public institutions, and their ideological profiles, because for me it's obvious that the equation that is in fact a Russian propaganda is saying that Ukraine is Banderite state. You know, this is you have to equate being Ukrainian or the state of Ukraine as such with the ideology of Bandera and so on, which is obviously false. And everyone, and we have a lot of occasions, sadly, I mean, sadly in the sense that the war is the reason, but we also have this opportunity to know a lot of Ukrainians who are in Warsaw. I mean, that's a positive, but we can talk, and they don't have anything to do with any banderism or anything like that. They're just normal people, etc. But on the other hand, the argument goes that far-right movements in Ukraine is a very marginal phenomenon. Right-wing parties, meaning Svoboda, right sector, have no support in polls. They are unable to gain any seats in parliament. They are unable to be elected for presidents, and so on and so forth. Where is the truth? Because you also posted a lot of things about schools, public institutions, universities. How is it there? Is it a kind of prominent ideology, or is it one of ideologies that are present, accepted? Is it marginal? Is it gaining momentum? And how these discussions even look like in those spaces at school, at universities, and so on.
Mm-hmm. So let's take an example of memory politics, for example. Let's start with memory politics. Then we can move forward to, for example, language politics, which is very discriminatory towards Russian-speaking people in Ukraine. But let's start with memory politics. So after Maidan, the very radical so-called decommunization started. So decommunization, it was, let's get rid of Soviet past, let's portray everything Soviet as evil, it was occupation, we are innocent, we were victims. So it's common for many countries in post-Soviet space, in Baltic states. In Ukraine is different, but after thousands of monuments of Lenin were toppled, many streets were renamed, and so forth, so forth. So Ukraine got rid until 2022, got rid of many of these, signs of this colonial or imperial presence in Ukraine. But what happened in 2022? To decommunization was added the decolonization. Decolonization is more complex idea. And the idea of decolonization was to get rid of everything that reminds us about, Russians. So the war on monument started to resemble crusade against Bulgakov, against Dostoevsky, against Jewish writers like Isaac Babel, who, and thanks to Isaac Babel, we know about anti-Jewish pogroms committed by Red Army in Galicia, actually, during the First World War and during Civil War. Yeah, so the war on monuments nowadays is unprecedented, and we know, this open letter to UNESCO from Odessa intellectuals, because the main idea is stop turning Odessa into Lviv. And by Lviv, I mean, I lived in the area in Lviv where I, went to the grocery on Shukhevich Street, then turned to Bandera Street to my pharmacy, led walk my son through Konovaltsa Street, towards Melnika Street, to his school on Insurgent Street. So you got my point, yes?
Yeah,
so
I get it.
Basically, banderization of Ukraine is not a myth. After 2022, many names appeared on the map in Poltava Oblast, Kharkiv, Odessa, Khersonska Oblast, Chernihiv, Cherkasska, who has nothing to do with Bandera and Shukhevich, actually. Only small minority of people who supported UNUPA were present there. Yeah, but I always give this example of one small village in Odessa, 2,000 people, but they got bingo. They have Olena Teliga Street, Bandera Street, Melnik Street, and Shukhevich Street in one single small village. So, and now, can you imagine all those, veterans of the Second World War who fought Nazis in the ranks of the Red Army? How to explain this to them, or to their, or to their daughters and, to their children? How to explain them that now Ukraine is basically cheering Nazi collaborators who fought your relatives? Yeah, it's crazy what is going on. Then let's talk about schools. My son nowadays in his American school, he is studying genocide, and they compare Holodomor to genocide in Rwanda. They talk about Holocaust, and he approached me and asked me, "Mama, please tell me, what is genocide denial?" And I opened my Facebook and show him all these celebrations in Ukraine schools in Lviv, ordered by city council to celebrate the glorious death of Roman Shukhevich. It was entire week when children were obliged to draw a picture of Roman Shukhevich, to learn about his music skills, how great he was, how a person, and this is how Holocaust denial and Holocaust distortion and Nazi apology looks like. Because those kids, third grade, fourth grade, and even further, they do not discuss his involvement in ethnic cleansing of Polish people, of killing Polish children, women, and they do not talk about this. They do not talk about his past, collaborationist activity. They are not talking about intimate violence and about ethnic violence. And if they touch upon this topic, they justify it. It was just, byproduct of war for independent Ukraine. So basically, the problem is with current memory politics in Ukraine. It has nothing to do with critical thinking. It has nothing to do with learning the lessons of the Holodomor and Holocaust and other genocides. It's pure apology. Why? Because it's war, and state powers, political elites believe that this will cheer people up, will give an example to soldiers, and so on and so forth. So basically, I am very disappointed by memory politics. And those people who say, but we have Jewish president. And I say, yeah, of course. But in his address to Knesset in spring 2022, he was talking about the Holocaust, and he ended up with the phrase, Ukrainians made their choice during the Holocaust. They saved Jews. And it was the end. Without other part of the story, which was more complex, without even mentioning that our UNUPA heroes were involved in Holocaust, were involved in killing of Jews and persecuting of Jews. When many ordinary people were involved in this intimate ethnic violence. Nothing about this. And I want to say that under Jewish president, the first parade celebrating anniversary of Division Waffen-SS Galicia in Kyiv happened in 2021 under Jewish president, under our Zelensky presidency. So basically, this cult of Waffen-SS Division Galicia left Galicia borders and went further due to this ethno-nationalist turn in memory politics. That's why I am very critical of this politics. Another problem with this politics, you know, when Trump started to argue why we should, you know, have peace with Russia and, you know, be friend with Russia, he several times made a reference to the World War II, and, you know, he mentioned that Russians were so brave and they helped us Americans fought Nazism and deal with Hitler. And he never mentioned Ukrainians, but 6 million of Ukrainians served in the Red Army. At least 6 million Ukrainians, you know, and they were killed in the ranks of Red Army. They were starved to death as prisoners of wars at the hands of Germans. And so what? And the memory plaques that commemorate their contribution to fighting Nazis now are completely erased from the memoryscape. They are portrayed or as the perpetrators, as collaborators with Soviets, or as victims, but never heroes. And this is disgrace. That's why when Ukraine's complaining that nobody remember how much Ukrainians did to fight Nazism, it's partly there. It's the consequences of memory politics. So they should be aware that there is direct connection. If you prefer to celebrate Nazi collaborators, it's your choice. So you should, you know, deal with this choice. But you know, these memory politics make so many divisions in Ukrainian society, because Bandera and Shukhevich are not heroes for many people in the Eastern Ukraine. They are still villains. They are still those people who cut breasts of, you know, those poor teachers who were sent from Eastern Europe, from Eastern Ukraine to Western Ukraine. You know, in their eyes, they are still those who executed the heads of schools, the heads of kolkhoz, you know, collective farms, who executed so many innocent civilian people, including children. Because we know that UN actually practiced this principle of collective responsibility, and entire families were just punished, decapitated, and just or hanged or just shot dead. You know, so you can't. So basically, what I lack in Ukrainian memory politics, this very responsible reading of history. You know. How we can deal with anti-Semitism, bigotry, and hate in our society if we basically cheer Nazi collaborators who openly celebrate Nazi crimes and justify Nazi crimes? It's crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah, I think I recognize similar patterns in Polish politicized memory. I think we have the same institution, the National Institute for Memory, or so we have that's a similar model. And you know, in Poland, it goes according to the same paths, because we, of course, the communism entirely is criminalized. Every left-wing politics in the past is criminalized. I got to know recently that we actually had 2 occupations in Poland. You know, it was not a occupation by Nazi Germany, and then whatever you call it, liberation or kind of survival, or I don't know, renaissance of Polish statehood, but it's another occupation by Soviet Union. And we also had, which is even more insane, 2 resistance movements. And the second resistance, this is now the new invention, were actually people who are called żołnierze wyklęci in Polish,
yes,
which are
yes.
those soldiers who refused to accept Yalta and the peace process after the Second World War. But those people were very right-wing, basically, and also with a record of very nasty behavior towards civilians. And today in Poland, there is the glorification, full-scale glorification of those groups, which, of course, as you mentioned before, changes this symmetry, I think, false symmetry between two totalitarianisms into an inversion. In a sense that, nowadays I can bring one example of a leftist politician, a elected official in Polish parliament who is a left-wing woman who said that she wished Red Army stopped earlier in their movement of, gaining territory during the Second World War, which I think people really forget would mean, Majdanek, Auschwitz functioning further. And it's just an insane level of, really brainwashing, because it's a left move, it's a left party, who completely accepts this insane degree of reversal of the history, and a chaos in all categories, notions, and so on. So I think this is really a kind of regional problem, and I think the problem in its core comes from the fact that we just have to hate whatever was Soviet, and why we have to do it? We have to do it because we are open to a new wave of colonization. This is my opinion, which is the colonization by Western capital and international corporations. And when I see what's happening in Ukraine now, and I hear this concept of decolonization, I kind of understand it when it comes to, like cultural history between Ukraine and Russia. I'm not an expert here. I don't have any strong opinions, but at the same time, BlackRock and JP Morgan taking over the Ukrainian debt is nothing, reminding me of decolonization. On the contrary, this is the typical colonization move, which comes from, financial dependency and so on and so forth. So, and in Poland it's even over, because we had it for 30 years. We don't even discuss it anymore because it's done. Basically, we are a quasi-colony in the economic sense. It's just it's no longer the case. That's why it's more peaceful, because it's out of question now.
Yeah.
Let me come to this political aspect, because I think it's very crucial, and I'm also very curious. What do you think? Because if I understand correctly, this the foundations of this apology is that, okay, these movements are far right. They are not very nice. They have a lot of ideological leanings which are questionable, but they are instrumental in the fight against Russia. They are the best equipped, best trained, and best performing troops on the battlefield. Well, that's the argument I try to paraphrase.
Yeah.
That's not necessarily what I personally think, but I think this is how it goes.
Yeah.
And so we have to suspend these suspicions for a while, because there is a greater cause, and we have to accept that in the liberation movement and liberation war, which we have in Ukraine, not everyone will be politically perfect, and not every movement would be acceptable according to, I don't know, the criteria of West politics and liberal democracies. So my question is, don't you think that when we start to talk about far right, no matter in this case in Ukraine or Poland, but of course we don't have war in Poland nowadays, but we immediately step upon the question of anti-war, because it's so crucially linked, the acceptance or whitewashing of this right-wing movements with the actual acceptance of, you know, our mission, which is war. And I don't mean it, you know, now to analyze the background, the genesis, and you know, all the causes and root causes of the war today. But actually, when we talk about what we want, we cannot resign on far-right movement or far-right groups or far-right brigades, because we would have to accept that this whole story is somehow different from what we are told. Don't you think? Because, well, you mentioned Ivan Kaczanowski, for example, who wrote a lot of things which are absolutely detrimental to the mainstream narrative from Maidan till today, you know. And I think that it's also kind of important to look at the whole process in a more complicated way.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. It's a very important question. So my answer is, far right are not only instrument in this war; they are cause of this war partly. Far right are one of the cause of this war, main cause of this war. You know, if the Maidan revolution was actually, yeah, many people participated, but it was, you know, those who made the real difference actually were far right. Because liberals were, you know, singing songs and waving flags and all this stuff, you know, peace, love, you know, giving, you know, flowers to soldiers, like in Georgia or like in Belarus, yeah, what we witnessed, yeah. It was, you know, fancy revolution, like, you know, this leftist revolution, yeah. But the main difference was made by far right, and they were armed, and they were from right sector, and they were from Patriot Ukraine, which is predecessor of Azov. Patriot Ukraine, Patriot of Ukraine, was a youth movement of National Socialist Party. The title, yeah? You get this, yeah? Not social.
Yeah, well, sounds familiar.
Yeah, sounds familiar somehow. And it was very racist, neo-Nazi party. They disseminated pamphlets about, you know, white Ukraine against immigrants. They were involved in ethnic violence in, you know, Kharkiv, because they were from the east. And they were the first who started to use Volksangel, actually. And now Azov claims, oh, it's just idea of a nation. It has nothing to do with Nazism. But when you trace, for example, far-right neo-Nazi groups in US, many of them, for example, Aryan Brotherhood, they use the same words, Angel. Guys, you can't claim that this is, you know, Ukraine, Asian symbol. It's a bullshit. It's a Volksangel. And why you don't give up this Volksangel? Because it's very important for you, because it's a part of your ideology, because you are not willing to give up your core ideology, which is based on these racist very ideas, you know, in this social hierarchy, you know, misogyny and so on and so forth. So far right actually made a difference. They made violence. They were involved in clashes with police. They had weapons. They were the reason why so many people died during Maidan, you know, and they basically made revolution. So the main consequence of Maidan revolution was made by far right. And nobody discussed their program there. Nobody critically approached their slogans there, Bandera and all this stuff, Volksangel, you know, Solar Cross and other hate symbols that they displaced. Why? For the same reason. They were good guys and they were on our sides. They were the muscle basically
muscle,
of, they were our weapon. Yeah, the same we have now. But what happened when those people with far-right views gained power after Maidan? Institute of National Memory, yeah, in Ukraine, Vetrovich, He's a nationalist historian engaged in whitewashing, Ukrainian nationalists underground, justifying ethnic cleansing, justifying hunting Jews. And guess what we have now in official narrative of that the second ethnic group in UPA were Jewish people in recent exhibition. Jewish people were the second after Ukrainians in UPA. Just you to know. Yeah.
Thanks.
We already reached this point. We already reached this point of Holocaust denial and Holocaust distortion, and nobody cares. And this is made on this official level. Then the question of language. I remember Farion, who was a representative of Svoboda Party, this right-wing party, anti-Semitic party. She made this very passionate speech about, Ukrainian language in the parliament. And, they started real crackdown on Ukrainian language. And it was very dangerous back then because new Ukraine authority didn't have enough legitimacy on Donbass. And they started to use violence, and they started this violent rhetoric. And Putin just took advantage of all these divisions that were created basically by this ethno-nationalist rhetoric. So if you want to keep your society, Ukraine is very different from Poland. Polish people should understand that half of Ukraine army speaks Russian. They speak Russian language. Half of Ukrainian army, you listen to testimonies of soldiers without their legs. Even soldiers from this decorated, Azov movement, they are without their legs and they are speaking in Russian. And sometimes even they are blamed. Despite of their sacrifice, despite of their endured trauma, they are blamed for still using Russian language. How dare you demonize, Russian-speaking people in Ukraine? It's a road to more violence. It's a road to civil conflict. It's a road to more war. And what we now, those people who say, but far rights are so good, guy. They are so, they should keep fighting because they are very good in this, So I must say that far right actually were against Minsk agreement. No capitulation. They prevented Zelensky, they threatened him and prevented him from implementing Minsk agreement. Ukraine, and they were so radical. They occupied streets, they were involved in clashes with the police. They were so violent because they gained military training actually. And Zelensky, I believe, was afraid. So what Zelensky did? Now he made Azov movement basically his main army. If you just analyze the media sphere in Ukraine, the YouTube, those war propagandists, different journalists, different YouTubers, majority of their guests are members of Azov movement. So they invest so much money in promoting them. Last year I visited Lviv. So it was very interesting for me because I was shocked. When I left Lviv, we didn't have so many T-shirts with Volksangel and NSDAP Nazi Party eagle on their, on the full display. So I went to Prostorov synagogue, the space of synagogue, this Holocaust memorial there. Swastikas there are painted on these, stones, solar cross, SS bolts, and, people with, with this NSDAP, recognizable Nazi eagle on their shirt and Volksanger are just, 10 meters away are drinking beer. And if you go further, several dozens of meters, you enter, shop with funny stuff, Daddy Bandera socks, Daddy Bandera socks, bag Daddy Bandera, and all this funny stuff. It's so cute, you know. It's just, you know, our way to combat, you know, to deal with stress of war. But it's, you know, so Nazi and Nazi apology became very glamour even in Ukraine, you know, very popular. And so I believe far right were the part of the problem, the part of the full-scale invasion. And now, if you carefully read their you know, their blogs, for example, if you're careful about their rhetoric, they are talking about Ukraine expansion. Azov movement is selling pins and t-shirts with big Ukraine, which includes some Polish territories, and not only Polish territories. So be aware of this when you invite Azov to your country. And pay attention. The 3rd Assault Brigade now is transformed to the 3rd Army Corps. It means that they will have several dozens of, so they will have approximately 20, 30 thousands of people who will undergo the same ideological training about big Ukraine. Just follow their social media. They are very open about this. Just follow their blogs. They are very open about big Ukraine. About big Ukraine. And this big Ukraine includes territory of Poland, includes territory of Hungary, includes territory of Moldova, includes territory of Belarus, and territory of Russia. So please be aware. Why? Because they say the true nationalism always go hand in hand with imperialism. They are and they receive NATO weapon, they receive NATO training, they are welcomed in Pentagon. I hope that Trump will change this, you know, because this backing was under, you know, Biden administration, and, you know, different think tanks backed them and whitewashed them, you know, in the international level. But those guys are very explicit about their agenda, and it has nothing to do with peace. And I believe far right in Ukraine are threats not only for Ukraine democracy, are threats not only for peace negotiation in Ukraine, but are threats for peace in Europe. And this is very serious.
Okay, thanks. I mean, thanks and not thanks, because it's really, it's a dim vision. But let me ask you further, because I was thinking about the fact that you know, there are a lot of people from Poland who go to Ukraine. They write reports. They are journalists visiting back and forth, and no one says anything about it. And I don't know if it's less visible for them, or is it just a kind of you know, common censorship or common taboo, or I don't know how to even imagine comparing these stories with your anecdote about your visit. And the other thing is that maybe this would be the first question. The second question goes further, because I wanted to ask you about exactly the peace process. Because I mean, now, not before Minsk agreements and so on. I think it's reasonable to say that if Western countries were really up to peace, then they would support Zelensky and his peace formula, because I think he gained, he won the election with peace plan, if I'm not mistaken, or peace rhetorics. Mm-hmm. But the problem was that in order to implement it, he needed, again, as just after Maidan, he needed to have a centralized and strong power, because otherwise he would not be able to execute his plan. And then United States, above all, was not interested in supporting him in this endeavor, and they still supported or trained, etc., the right-wing movements. And now I think the situation changed, and again, I don't know, but I would say we don't have centralized power, which is powerful enough to really be a guarantor of any kind of peace process, not to mention the fact that Zelensky for now is not very on board. But anyway, any kind of formula requires that there is one, you know, power center, and everyone kind of accepts the result of peace process. And with these movements and their plans, it looks like very complicated thing to do, don't you think?
Exactly. You know, recently, the former celebrity Azov commander Krutevich gave an interview, and he said, "I'm against peace negotiation because I believe that Ukraine can win the war." And some persons say he's delusional because when we witness, you know, changes, now we lost Kursk Oblast, Ukraine forces almost withdrawn from Kursk Oblast. So we lost, you know, so many people there. One of my relatives was there. He was also drafted by force and sent there. And after a very heavy injury, he refused to go back. And now he faces charges with treason. He wasn't professional, of course, like most of majority of Ukrainian soldiers are not professional soldiers, are not professional combatants. But the problem is that he said, "I will not return to this meat grinder," you know, because there is a very complicated discussion in Ukraine about their leadership in many so many commanders actually use the same tactic of meat waves. You know, they don't spare their soldiers, and it's a very problematic discussion. But when you want to openly talk about this, you are blamed for, you know, supporting Russian propaganda, you know, parroting, you know, Russian propaganda, helping them demoralize Ukrainian society. But you know, this is real problem. And if you talk to people who have relatives in the army, they all are talking about this. You know, my mother died last year. And during funeral, my family members, you know, extended family members attended this funeral. And I was shocked how many of my family members are in the army. I didn't know that. And, you know, I have sisters who are, you know, who are siblings. And one sister lost her husband. And one sister also lost her, and another lost, but he's claimed missing officially. But we know what does it mean, be missing. We know that in this technological war, many corpses cannot be taken, you know, from this territory, or there is nothing to take. And she receives nothing from the state. No financial support, no social benefits. And it's a real problem. And when you're talking about all these problems, when you're talking about forced mobilization, about those people who are kidnapped by TRC officers, Territorial Recruitment Center, you know, draft officers, when you're talking about this, when you post these videos of violent, you know, mobilization, people say, or, you know, they justify this because, yeah, you should go and fight for your motherland. But it has nothing to do with, you know, with dignity. It has nothing to do with human rights. And if you mobilize people with heavy medical conditions, it's a crime against humanity. It's a crime against humanity under international law. You know how many people with epilepsy, with drug addiction, with alcohol addiction, without fingers, nowadays are mobilized? You can't even imagine. Because there is a shortage of manpower. And when I recently saw results of polls, when 56.4% Polish people said that they are against sending troops to Ukraine, my question to you, do you really think that Ukrainian soldiers are immortal? Or do you really believe that those who are drafted by force could be good soldiers and protect you from, from these Putin's, soldiers. Do you know how many deserters are in Ukraine army? More than 100,000. It's a bigger number than the number of entire army in the Great Britain. Do you know how those people who deserted are treated when they are caught by law enforcement? They are kept in their, in different dirty places. They are beaten. They are mistreated. Why this information is absent in our mainstream media? Why we always talk about, crimes, Nazi crimes, Soviet crimes, and KVD, how they use terror during interrogation, use force during interrogation, but we say nothing about those people who are mistreated at the hand of their own, authorities, because they don't want to fight, but they don't believe in peace plan. They just want this war to stop and save at least some part of Ukraine. Because every single day we are losing more and more Ukraine territory. We are facing more and more destruction. But many people in Poland, many even my friends, they want Ukraine to keep fighting because they want to win time to rearm, for example, to train more soldiers, to develop more programs, to move more NATO troops to Poland. So basically all those talks, and this is one of the reasons why those people turn the blind eyes to far rights in Ukraine. Because they want them to fight, not send their sons and not go to. That's why all those, I remember when the member of the 3rd Assault Brigade went to Auschwitz Memorial in Poland with Nazi eagle, with Nazi, with Nazi citation, and some Polish media claim it was Russian propaganda. Actually, we don't know who this person is. I know. Maybe you will ask those people who know this person. And actually, his prominent visit to Auschwitz, and he was very open about this because he's anti-Semite, and he basically mocked Holocaust survivors. This was one of the reasons why the talk of Dvish, the 3rd Assault Brigade tour, was canceled in Germany. It's not, it has nothing to do with Russian propaganda. And of course, Russian propaganda will if you do shit, Russian propaganda will use this shit against you. It's war. Yeah, it is, and information war is a very strong part of this war. So if you pretend that this is not, happening, this is not existing in our reality, you will lose. You will lose. Because we have a lot of proofs that Nazi problem in Ukraine is real. Of course, it's not a justification for Putin's aggression and for crimes of Putin soldiers in Ukraine. But Ukraine should deal with its Nazi problem. Yesterday, do you know that one of the clothing brands in Ukraine, far-right clothing brand, Swaston, with actually a slang word for swastika in Ukraine and Russia, made a new jacket with the Nazi eagle, Luftwaffe eagle, precisely Nazi, and they made an inscription, World War II German pilot. And why is problematic? Because Swaston company cooperates officially with Ukraine military intelligence under Budanov. And we have many our top politicians and military leaders, including Zaluzhny, who wear Swaston clothes. So the problem is not just, some marginal, the problem is on the very high level. And everyone is closing eyes. pretending that this is, the just byproduct of nation building process and decolonization. No, guys, you are turning blind eyes on ethno-nationalism that is on the rise in Ukraine and will threaten directly, first of all, its neighbors, including Poland.
Yeah, well,
bad news for many Polish people.
Yeah. I think that this false support for Ukraine, which is pushing it further into the war, and as you said, into meat grinder. I think it also comes from the career building. I mean, there are a lot of careers built upon this in media and culture. Not to mention the whole NATO infrastructure, because that's just really a rocket. It's a gold mine. And I think also insofar as the sacrifice is bared by Ukrainians themselves, and we just have gains and not lose much in terms of people, I don't know, territory, infrastructure, and so on. It's a great business. We kind of manifest our extreme honor and our virtues of patriotism, solidarity, and so on, but it's poor people in Ukraine who are dying. I mean, because richer ones got out before because they had money to buy out themselves or something. I mean, or just to leave Ukraine. I mean, it's a typical war history. It's always like this. It's bourgeois circles who are supporting the narrative, but it's popular classes who pay the price. And I think it's for me it's really it's insane that no one in Polish left understands it. That understands this war in the perspective of class division and to what extent it's a perfect tool of exploitation. No matter what you think about Russian regime, politics, and so on and so forth, because that's a separate question. By the way, people also say, yeah, but there are neo-Nazis in Russia too. And, I'm not supporting financing or training Russian neo-Nazis, for Christ's sake.
Exactly.
Are we paying them? Are we paying them from NATO money or not? Because if not, then great. And we should not. But how come the existence of, I don't know, there are probably, there are a lot of far-right people in India. It has nothing to do with us, and I think that the core problem is, and this would be maybe my last point and last question, because when I observe what happens in Polish politics, I have to say that the absence of right response from the left, which is, if you want, there is a tiny little bit of leftists which are anti-war, but it's really a margin in the margin. The institutionalized left parties in parliament are fully on board for this war, and the absence of the right response leaves an empty space which is filled by far right in Poland, which is in fact anti-Ukrainian in ethnic sense, not in political sense, not in military sense, but these people are really prejudiced. They ignite prejudices against Ukrainian people within Polish society, and they are the only ones who use anti-war rhetoric or anti-war, sometimes right arguments. But since there is no counterbalance from the left, you are just left with this, with the fact that you are either, for me, anti-Ukrainian because you support meat grinder that kills a lot of Ukrainians, or you are anti-Ukrainian because you just hate Ukrainians, no matter what they think and what they do. No matter that they, build Polish economy, work hard, and so on, you just hate them because they're not Polish, and that's a real tragedy. Because for me, it's kind of acceptable that we are not going to be supported by, I don't know, liberals, right wings, and so on. That's I kind of accepted because that's reality. But the level of, how to say, I mean, the suicide of the left in this yes. problem is amazing, and the short-term gains, which is just the acceptance of people who don't care at all about Ukraine in any way, is destroying any possibility to really create some kind of actual solidarity, because you cannot be like in solidarity with the country that is not going to exist. You know, you have to build something with these people, and you have to share something, and you have to have a vision in which there is place for everyone. No. And if you just have this exclusionary political ideologies, there is nothing to be built. And my last, that's a statement rather than question maybe, but now comes the question: is there any kind of left counterbalance in Ukraine, or how is opposition to this insanity built? Is there? I imagine that in wartime situation it's really very difficult and complicated to manifest it, but I'm sure there are people who just refuse to accept this rhetoric and so on. How is it in reality?
Thank you so much. You know, Ukraine is on the way to dictatorship. And if war will prolongs, Ukraine will turn into heavy armed with very motivated nationalists who support Zelensky, fully support Zelensky. They stopped criticizing him actually. And why is on the way of dictatorship? Any criticism, for example, of seizing churches in Ukraine, which belong to Moscow Patriarchate, and just to provide you couple numbers, most of churches in Kharkiv Oblast, Sumy Oblast, Chernihiv, basically north, east, and south, hundreds of them still belong to Moscow Patriarchate, because people don't want to shift to this, you know, newly created under Poroshenko, this Orthodox Church. So they prefer to be with this church. But what nationalists are doing, for example, recently in Cherkasy, one of the biggest church was seized by force with the support of nationalists. Yeah, so this is their direct power. They don't need, you know, parliament which is corrupted and people are just paid for making some decisions. Yeah, because nowadays in Ukraine parliament, the pro-president party, Sluga Narodu, is sided with OPZZ, which was always pro-Russian. And they are just minions now, and they are very, you know, polite with Zelensky, and they sided together and make decisions. And those guys are not imprisoned. But those who criticize violent seizure of those churches, those who criticize forced mobilization, those who criticize forced Ukrainization, they are visited by security service of Ukraine immediately. Several of my friends who are scholars were threatened with imprisonment for criticizing politics of state authorities and Zelensky humanitarian, basically, politics. So if you think that, you know, this is minor problem and this is just problem of self-censorship and censorship, no. We have political repressions in Ukraine. We have political repressions. When people who advocate for you know, more just, let's say, mobilization, or who, you know, criticize this method, very violent method of mobilization, they are charged with treason, which is, and many of them are leftist, actually. Yeah, so basically they are charged with treason, and this means so they could be put in prison for, you know, 20 year, 25, or life imprisonment. And many of them are intellectuals, and many of them are leftists. So what Zelensky regime did in Ukraine, they they created no space for criticism. They create no space for leftist thought in Ukraine. They created no space for peace talks, even in Ukrainian society. If you are talking about peace in any terms, it means that you undermine somehow, you know, or you want to seize Ukrainian territories. It's a treason, you know, it's a collaboration, it's a justifying of Russian aggression. So everything you can now, that's why, for example, I can't even visit Ukraine nowadays, because I can face the same accusation of treason, because of my criticism of, you know, this banderization of Ukraine, this, you know, violent Ukrainization, the criticism of this, you know, forced mobilization, so on and so forth. Many intellectuals left Ukraine for this reason. They can't speak openly. They can't write openly. Very small, you know, percentage of people, leftists, really leftist activists, are in Ukraine, and they prefer to support mobilization and to justify it. I believe, on the one hand, is their survival strategy. But on the other hand, I really believe that they betray their ideas, because what this war showed to us, that we have a division across class lines. Two sons of Poroshenko are in London. Two sons of you know, Klitschko, they are in Germany. Our politicians make different excuses for their husbands, you know, and for their sons. They send them, you know, to fancy restaurants, to fancy universities abroad. Almost all children of our political elites are abroad. They are safe. They live their good life. Who are drafted to the army now? Drafted are working class people. Working class people who don't have. Today, people are discussing how much cost to bribe draft officers to make them free you from this van. It could be several hundred, but it could be several thousand. They openly discuss how much it costs to pay bribe to leave the country. $20,000, $25,000, and for Ukraine, it's insane money. My salary in the Ukraine Academy of Science before the war was $50. 50. So just to most of Ukrainian researchers, they have 200 or 300, you know, dollars monthly salary. So can you imagine who can survive this war? This war will survive only rich people, basically, and those who make money on this war, those who basically sell deaths. You know what some commanders say? If it will be ceasefire, why some combatants don't want ceasefire? When ceasefire will be, their salary will be only $500. So for them, it's a question also of, you know, their opportunities, their economic opportunities, because for many men, it's a good opportunity to improve their social situation, economic situation, improve situation of their family members, you know. That's why war is so, you know, is so evident that, you know, people are making money on, you know, weapon trafficking. We have so much illegal weapon, you know, in Ukraine nowadays. It's a sex trafficking. The military prostitution is flourishing nowadays. It's a shadow military prostitution, you know, drug, you know, narco trafficking. It's all connected to the war. You know, people are making money of this war, and they put Vyshyvanka and they pretend that they care about people and they care about national interests. And back then, you know, they served Yanukovych and other pro-Russian politicians. But now they are very vocal, you know, Ukrainians in Vyshyvanka, because they just want to make profit from this bloody war. And they give a damn about, you know, working class men who don't have enough money to pay bribe and to save their lives. This is the reality of Ukraine nowadays. if you support continuation of this war, you support extermination, basically, of working class people in Ukraine. And you support capitalism. And you support all these, Western powers who contributed to provocation of this war. Because I believe if Biden, back then in 2021, will say clear statement, no NATO for Ukraine, we know that Putin is obsessed. Now in US, I understand this logic. I can't imagine any Russian military base or China military base in Mexico or in Canada. Those countries will be bombed.
Yeah.
So
well,
why do you expect that Russian superpower will behave in different way?
Yeah, well, that we have missile launchers installed in Poland, and the argument back then was that it's to defend United States from Iran. And everyone bought it, We have to have these launchers, which, by the way, appear in the rhetorics of Russia, because they say that's against them, which I think is reasonable. But anyway, we accept that we have to defend America from the attack from Iran, which is really far away, but we kind of cannot imagine that our launchers could be of danger to anyone else. It's just not thinking, It's not about your opinions or which side you're on, etc. It's just so illogical, and it's so devoid of imagination, like a basic imagination. Because if it's not to mention the fact, by the way, that in most Polish ex-generals, which are experts in media, they really 3 years on, they are defeating Putin. Really, they still do it. I mean, last week there was one of the very popular ex-general who said that if anything happens, we will smash Putin in 3 days. I mean, Poles, which no one wants to fight in Polish army. I mean, that's obvious. But maybe, and he said, I mean it. It's literal quotation. He said, maybe we will stop at Ural. Maybe, This is the detachment from reality on a
exactly.
I mean, on a cosmic scale. It's just teaching people to completely isolate from reality, and it's very dangerous. And I think we all participated in it in different ways and on different scale, but we are all responsible. And I think if we don't take this responsibility back, we are not going to build anything. I mean, we are not going to have any peace whatsoever with anyone, because in a couple of months we could have war with the United States. I mean, I don't know. It goes so fast that, maybe not Poland, because Poland would accept being 51st state of US more than do anything against it. I mean, I'm sure of it. But in a sense, we are on the course to some really completely irrational projects, instead of just accepting basic reason. It's insane for me. And it's good to talk sometimes with people who kind of still carry on with some reason, because it gives me a little bit of hope, which I don't have much, unfortunately. And it's all to say, Marta, that it's really great to talk with you, and thanks very much for accepting my invitation to our podcast. Do you have any last words of hope or some positive visions to leave our audience with?
So my last words for our audience will be: give peace a chance.
Oh yeah, that's a good words.
We should fight for peace and not, fuel this ethno-nationalism and militarism. It's a dead end.
Yeah.
Because sometimes I have an impression that Europe already forgot what happened during the Second World War, you know, and the Third World War will be much, much destructive because of the nuclear weapon. That's why we should fight for peace and use any means to fight for peace. So
yeah, I agree. I totally agree. I think it's Einstein who said that he doesn't know how the Third World War would be fought, but the fourth one would be fought with sticks because there would be nothing less, nothing left.
Yes.
So I think we should really keep working to avoid this scenario.
Yeah,
okay.
exactly.
Okay, Marta Havryshko was my guest. I'm really very, very grateful for you, to you for coming, and hopefully we'll see each other again in better circumstances, and maybe we'll talk about how great it is in Ukraine and Poland and everywhere. Let's keep fingers crossed, and thanks very much. Thanks.
Thank you so much for the invitation, for having me, and peace and love for everyone.
Give peace a chance. That's a good slogan.
Give peace a chance.
Yeah.
Give peace a chance. Yes.
Thanks
Thank
very
you.
much.